right, let's talk some Big Ten linebackers. For this week, we are going to tier the top 20 inside linebackers in the Big Ten heading into 2025. That includes at least one linebacker on every team, and then the extra two spots are for obviously the two best second linebackers in the conference. Um, so, right off the top, let's get this thing started. I believe there to be a clear number one linebacker in this conference heading into 2025, and that is Indiana's Aiden Fisher. He had over 100 tackles last year for the Hoosiers. He's a guy who followed Kurt Signetti to Bloomington from James Madison. If I had a vote for the preseason All-American team, I'd strongly consider him for my first team. And I think that puts him in a class of his own. I think Indiana has a really good defense heading in next year. Um, and that honestly might be their strength. And Fisher's a big reason why, as well as Mikal Kamara, who is also likely an All American candidate. And they have two guys that are just as good as about almost any defender you're going to find in this conference outside of maybe Caleb Downs and Coy Parrish, but that's not typically the case at Indiana. So that's a big reason why they could continue to have the same success in 2025 that they did in 24. So I have Fisher all alone in the first tier. And then let's talk about the rest here. So in the second tier, I got this is the elite players at the position. These are guys that would be number one linebackers on just about any team in the country. They might have All American potential, but they haven't had that same production that Fisher's had, which puts them a notch below. I think you could make a real argument for um, Fisher being in the same tier, but I'm a fan of Fisher's game a lot. At number two, I have Sonny Styles from Ohio State, who could be that next great Ohio State defender. They're going to have a guy emerge next to Caleb Downs that this time next year we're going to be. He'll probably be a first round pick. That's just how Ohio State works. But I'm going to be honest. On paper, they don't really have that guy, which kind of lends me to believe that they're not going to win the conference this year. Despite being defending national champions. They lost a ton of production. You always say that about every team, blue blood program. You say that about Alabama, about Michigan, about Georgia, about Clemson, but Ohio State really lost a lot of talent. But Sonny Styles is one of their best returning players on the defense. And I think I'd make a strong argument that he might be their second best defensive player behind Caleb Downs, which puts him at number two on my list. And then number three, we have Amari Campbell from Penn State, who is a transfer in from North Carolina. Really talented linebacker. I really like what Penn State did in the transfer portal this year. Filled some needs with Campbell, and then on the offense side of the ball with Trevor Pena and a couple other places. But Campbell has a chance to be the best linebacker in this conference, but he would have to take a step up to usurp Styles and Fisher, which I think firmly puts him at number three for me. Um, then at number four, we have Bryce Botcher from Oregon. Going to lead that team in tackles this year. A really good linebacker. Just a notch below the first three guys, in my opinion. I like his game a lot, and a big reason why I think Oregon has a really good defense heading into 2025. But I got him at number four, and then at number six or five, we have Ernest Hausman from Michigan, and Michigan's defense is just loaded this year. They do a really good job recruiting on the defensive side of the ball. Last year, they had Mason Graham, Will Johnson. Um, they just really churn out defensive talent year after year. And at the linebacker position, Hausman's my bet to lead this team in tackles. But we'll get to it in a bit. Jayshon Barman is not too far behind, and they really have a talented group there, which I think will help their true freshman quarterback Bryce Underwood. And they have the talent to be in that top tier, but I just don't know if I'm ready to buy into Sharon Moore in year two and an 18-year-old quarterback. So that's what makes them one of the most interesting teams in the conference this year, but really good linebacker duo. And then at number 6, we have Daryl Jabome from Rutgers, who is another guy that could flirt around 100 tackles this year. Wouldn't shock me if he ended as a first team all conference player. Just a really talented guy that really fits Rutgers' entire roster, I think, where they just have a bunch of guys who are just solid and overlooked. And on paper, they might look like a 6-6 team, but this Rutgers team, it wouldn't shock me if they went 8-4. And Jabome is a solid talent at number 6. At number 7 now, we have Marquez Watson Trent, Nebraska linebacker, a transfer from Georgia Southern. A really productive college career at that level, but it's a big jump from the Sun Belt to the Big Ten. He was a big pickup. A lot of teams were after him. Could be a 100 tackle guy at Nebraska. I'm a fan of his talent, but it's hard to rank a guy who's transferring in from the Sun Belt much higher than that. So I got him at 7, right ahead of Jayshon Barham from Michigan. Like I mentioned earlier, really impressive duo in Ann Arbor there. And that rounds out that tier. And then in the next tier, we have solid top options. These are guys that it wouldn't shock me if they were under 100 tackles. I think I'm expecting them to be under 100 tackles, I should say. But they have the potential to go over. And I think all these teams are happy with their options at the linebacker position, but they're just not as good as the tier above them. Like in those rooms and in those facilities, they're like, "Oh, we have great linebackers. Our defense is going to be good," but um, they I guess have a tier or a leap to still take to get into that next tier. And at the top of this list at 9, we have Dylan Rosiak from Illinois. Again, and kind of like Rutgers, Rosiak just fits that entire team's, I guess, mantra that he's not going to get many headlines, and they're not going to be like, "Whoa, look out for him!" But just a really solid football player. And then number 10, I've mentioned this a couple times. Another really underrated Northwestern transfer pickup, Yanni Karloftis, the younger brother of George Karloftis. Yanni was at Purdue, transferred to Northwestern after the coaching change. He was really productive at Purdue, and he'll lead Northwestern in tackles this year. I'd be pretty surprised if he didn't. And a lot of people aren't like, "Ooh, you got a Purdue linebacker," but it's again, they're one team, man. While I'm doing this, it is crazy how much really good talent they lost in the transfer portal. Really within the Big Ten, you got Max Clare, tight end, went to Ohio State. Dylan Tieneman, safety, went to Oregon. Yanni Karloftis, linebacker, went to Northwestern. But Karloftis, underrated player, kind of like Preston Stone at quarterback. And I'm blanking on their receiver from South Dakota State's name, but Northwestern might not get much higher than 6-6 this year. That might be their ceiling, but they could be a frisky team. Next at number 11, I have Christian Allegro from Wisconsin. Solid Wisconsin linebacker, going to lead that team in tackles. Him and Tackett Curtis, if Wisconsin surprisingly improves defensively, it's going to be because of those two guys, two of their best defensive players. And at 12, we have the Gophers, Maverick Baranowski. Um, I mean, inside linebacker is an interesting position in modern football. I think it's kind of getting devalued almost year by year, but I think especially at the college level, it's really important still. And the Gophers have big shoes to fill with Cody Lindenberg out the door. I think Baranowski is going to be that number one guy. Coy Parrish is going to do his best to spoil the party, but Baranowski is probably the favorite to lead the team in tackles. Minnesota hasn't had a linebacker get over 100 tackles since Blake Cashman in 2018. Does Baranowski do that this season? I don't think so, but I think he has the potential to. He has the potential. I think he's better than Mariana Sori Marin, but probably doesn't have as high of a ceiling as Cody Lindenberg, just from a pure athletic standpoint. Um, Ultimately, just a really solid college linebacker. I don't know if he has an NFL career in front of him, like I said, from an athletic standpoint, because in the NFL especially, they want these versatile linebackers that can cover and that are essentially just big safeties that you can play in the box. And I don't think Baranowski has that skill set in him. But for the Gophers, for this year, I think he's the perfect linebacker in their system. And I think he'll have a big year with Lindenberg out the door. And then next, Tariq El Ukda from Washington. Butchered that name. I'm admittedly not great at pronouncing some of these names, but a solid linebacker. Another transfer in um, that is my guess to lead Washington in tackles this year. They have an interesting linebacker core. I believe 3 transfers. So Washington, one of the most interesting teams in this conference, but solid linebackers. And then Eric Gentry from USC rounding out that tier of solid top options. And then 15 through 20, I have guys that are probably going to lead their teams in tackles. They might not. And they're just kind of, meh, um, for lack of a better term. Wayne Matthews, the third at Michigan State. Arvell Reese, probably the most talented guy on this list, who will be Sonny Styles' running mate probably for most of the year. And then what I find interesting is Iowa. They probably don't have a top linebacker, which is rarely the case. They had Jay Higgins last year. They routinely have a great inside linebacker, and I don't think their defense does. If they have a weakness defensively this year, it's probably at linebacker. They have a really strong defensive line, secondary, but middle of the defense there, I think, might be their hole. And then rounding out that, we have Dylan Wingate from Maryland, John Vaughns from UCLA, and Manny Powell from Purdue. Um, like I mentioned, inside linebacker is an interesting position. At the top, if you have an elite inside linebacker, it can take your defense from good to great. It's hard in modern football for a great inside linebacker to carry a defense. And like I said, the versatility of being a big safety and being able to cover is so valuable in today's day and age. And racking up 10 to 12 tackles isn't like the number stats in football at the end of the day, especially defensively, are not as valuable as the casual fan would think, because if Maverick Baranowski gets 12 tackles, but he gets beat in coverage 3 times and lets up 2 touchdowns, that's not a great game. So a lot goes into a great inside linebacker. But I think the Gophers are in a good spot. They have Devin Williams and Oklahoma State transfer Jeff Roberson behind Baranowski. I think that's a solid 3-man rotation. I don't think it's among the best in the conference, but it's good enough that it won't hinder this defense, and it's good enough to raise the floor of the defense. So, that's the top 20 there. We're almost, I guess, to the end of these tiers. We have the secondary coming up next. I haven't decided if I'm going to split the cornerbacks and safeties. 2 very different positions, so it probably should, but as always, I appreciate you guys for listening. Make sure you leave a like on the video and hit subscribe. That helps us out a ton. Be on the lookout for any other Minnesota sports coverage on Gophers, on SI, Timberwolves, Vikings, and Twins. and be on the lookout for any more videos on this site. And until next time.